graduate school, of course I'll have a job. I may not have quite the job I want, but I'll get a job, and I'll get properly paid, and that's not going to be an issue, and I'm not going to worry about it. And that was the norm among my friends. We just didn't. That's gone. I don't know of a single student I talk to who thinks like that, or talks like that. It's just a completely different situation. And this crisis is driving that point home more and more and more. Every institution in this society is trying to cope in this situation and not doing a very good job. I teach at the new school. The program I teach in at the new school just doubled or tripled the number of students it takes in. And I wondered to myself, what's that about? It's not as though the jobs are doubling and tripling. The jobs are going the other way. So what are they doing? The answer is they don't know what they're doing. They don't see many jobs. They think, I'll go to school, I'll get more credentials. But there's too many other people doing that, and the jobs are disappearing. And the college wants it because they all pay fees. So the college can get through. This is crazy. All across the United States, the public higher education is being cut. The university where I used to teach, the University of Massachusetts, a state university there, is savagely cutting their programs, cutting their salaries, and it's across the United States. To remind you, I think I've told you this before, but it's not, there are roughly 15 million people in the United States who go to college and university right now. Under 3 million go to private schools. 12+ million go to public higher education. The what training that the future skilled labor force in America gets is performed in the public higher education system of this country. Every economist I know believes that in a competitive world economy, one of the most important things to secure your future economically is to have a well-trained, well-educated, skilled labor force, and the #1 institution producing that are public higher education. We are savagely cutting our public higher. That's crazy. That's shooting yourself in the foot. That is solving a temporary crisis problem by doing something that will cripple you for the rest of your life and to the future. Only a society in deep depression and trouble behaves like this. Very strange. The Chinese stimulus, which relative to their economy was much bigger than ours, put an enormous amount of money into expanding their higher public education. Hello. What's that? What's that about? They understand that that's their future, crucial to their future. We are cutting that in the United States, and we're doing it in the name of state efficiency, austerity, or whatever language is, but it's a very strange kind of self-destructive behavior in the middle of a crisis. It actually makes the prospects of coming out of this crisis slimmer, longer, slower. Very, and I'm not even speaking of what message you are sending to young people. What anger is being built up by people trained and led to expect a certain kind of job and a certain kind of life that is not there. And they're going to be looking for somebody to blame. And this country provides scapegoats, as you all know who they are, or you should. And that the temptation here, which you can already see all over the country, to point these fingers and get angry at this or that group, is also a measure of the culture not having developed a left wing which can talk about a social system as a problem, which can teach people what that means, which can begin to explore what an alternative system would look like, how it would work, why it would have different problems that might be preferable to the, and so on. But I don't want to end on a so let me tell you what I have told you before, but since it's not the same people that come each month, let me end on this. I've been doing public speaking for a long time, most of my adult life. I've been a radical or a leftist all that time, deeply influenced by Karl Marx and all the rest, all of which I am happy about and proud about. Hasn't changed. But in the last 18 months, I have had more opportunities, more invitations to speak on the radio, on television, in public forums than in the previous 40 years combined. And it's not only that I cannot physically do all of the things I'm invited to do, a wonderful problem to have, by the way, But it's the quality that's completely different. In the past, when I was invited, it would almost always be that the man or woman interviewing me would need to make sure to the audience, television, radio, whatever it was, that they were terribly broad-minded to have brought a person like that onto their program. This was a way of letting the audience know that they shouldn't confuse the interviewer with this weird, left-wing, crazy person that I was. And so the questions were tense with that kind of distance. I had to, every 15 minutes, explain why I wasn't an agent from Moscow or Beijing or something like that. Even if I was talking about a completely unrelated topic, this issue would have to. All of that has changed. My interviews now are with people who ask me questions, and it dawned on me about 12 months ago. I am now inside the framework of allowable discourse in America. I've come in from the cold. My views haven't changed. It's just now that when I say, look, you know, the problem is the system, and we really ought to question the system, people respond to me by saying, well, what do you mean by saying? And we have a conversation. Mm-hmm. They don't get freaked out that I'm some kind of alien evil force from someplace red. They don't do that. They want to hear about it, and they want to discuss it. And I can push it, and I can talk openly. I use the language, and it doesn't kill the conversation. And I get invited back. And I do radio stations, AM commercial stations, in the Carolinas, in Texas, in Salt Lake City, in Chicago, all over the place, as well as FM. I don't just do WBAI, Pacifica. I do a lot of that, but I don't just do that. I do BBC, I do Al Jazeera, I do all kinds of stuff, and it just keeps going more and more, and I know that if there were 50 more like me, they would all have these opportunities, and I'd be the first one to give it to them, since I can't physically do it. So let me conclude with this. The publicity is all about the tea parties. And that's an important social phenomenon we have to pay attention. Mm-hmm. But no one is paying attention to something else that's going on. It's not just that the right has emerged. It's also that the left has. It's just happening in a different way. We don't have any organizations. That's a terrible thing, but it's the truth. They do. And the organizations get the attention. But there's been a sea change in the way people are thinking about the United States, in what they're open to hear, what they're open to talk about. I'm telling you, it is a radically different. I was active in the 60s. This is much, much different from that. And I know from the range of people I talk to that something is going on. I don't know exactly what it is, so I can't tell you how deep it is, how long it'll last. Who knows? But it's been going now for at least 18 months. And there's no end. There seems to be no end in sight. And a teeny little story. Last Thursday night, I gave a talk. I was invited to a place called York College out in Jamaica, Queens. It's part of it. There were about 100 students. What the professors there told me is they've never had 100 students come to this was not a classroom. This was just a talk. You come if you want to. So 100 people came. They had told me I should expect between 20 and 30. So 100 people came to hear a talk about the crisis. I would say out of the 100, 7, maybe 8 people were white. Everybody else, apparently the student body there comes particularly from the Caribbean area, from different parts, and the neighborhood was that way too. And that was one of the nicest, best experiences I've had in a long, long time. Very smart students. Very engaged with the material, very on top of what, asking very good questions, agreeing with me on some things, fighting with me on others. As a teacher, you couldn't ask. These are students that are hungry to understand this crisis and what it means for them and their communities. And this was a wonderful opportunity. And again, I didn't just say the things I said here, I pushed further left than this. And that was no problem in the room. None. Not from those students, and not from about half a dozen faculty who also came. The faculty were pleased that a radical was speaking that wasn't them. That way they didn't have the risk. I took that risk. I'm in, I'm out, I don't care. So I could play that role, I understand that, I play that role. But the interesting thing was a student body. When we ended, they wanted to know, how can we change this? What do we as students have to do? I could not have scripted this meeting with more of a sense of possibility and potential and movement than I had in that randomly associated event in that little place out there by the Kennedy Airport. Just a remarkable, and I do this now more and more. If I had more energy, if I had more time, I would do even more of it. But being a Marxist economist, which is increasingly how I am presented. The funniest time, a couple of months ago, I went to Notre Dame, South Bend, Indiana. Big banners everywhere. Come here, Notre Dame, the Catholic school. Sure. Yeah. Come here, the Marxist professor. I said, oh my God. An auditorium, 300 people, filled to the brim. I give my Marxist speech. 6 feet above me is an immense bleeding Jesus. Before I talk, I look up. During my talk, I look up. I'm wondering what the symbolism here is for the audience. Wonderful meeting again. Just a spectacular meeting. My hostess, the woman who introduced me, Colleen, I'm not making this up, Colleen Kelly. She's the head of a student group, and they wanted a Marxist to finally come to Notre Dame. And the professor said, it's not ready, we shouldn't do it, 5 people will show up. 300 people came. Nobody required me to talk about the Soviet Union. They wanted to talk about the economic crisis and what it was doing to this country, and they were all raring to go and do. I think we will be surprised if finally somebody amongst us, maybe in this room, figures out how to create a new kind of organization. I think we will be as amazed as you can be at the flood of people who just want a place to go where they can do something from the left. We don't offer that, but they're there. They're there in huge numbers, and they haven't had any place to go for a long time. Thank you very much.